With more and more competition in the power meter market, it's having the great effect for you that prices are being driven down. They're much more affordable than they used to be. So with more of you investing in power meters, we thought we'd do a video on how to get started with one, which we think is important because actually when you first look at power numbers, they can seem quite confusing if you're used to just speed and heart rate.
So here are our 5 tips on how to get started using a power meter. The first thing you should do when you get your power meter is to learn how to calibrate it, which is the process that makes sure the power meter is reading accurately. Now, all different types of power meters will require different things in order to calibrate them. And some, in fact, don't require any calibration at all. But it's really important that you understand what your specific power meter requires, because the last thing you want is for it to be giving you misleading readings.
Yeah, now as I kind of alluded to, we get to use 3 different power meters here at GCN and all of them have inbuilt temperature compensation, but there are some out there on the market that don't. So that means it's a good idea to do a quick manual calibration pre-ride and then one mid-ride as well if the temperatures change significantly. And it's well worth doing because it really is a simple process using your head unit. When you actually jump on the bike and start riding, the first thing you're probably going to notice is that the power number appears to jump about all over the place. So 1 second it will be 200 watts, the next it might be 450, 1 second after that it could be 130. And that is because power meters give you an instantaneous reading of exactly what power you're doing at any particular moment. So a small acceleration, we'll see it spike, and as soon as you let off the gas, it will come back down just as quickly.
Yeah, so to give yourself a much smoother, more accurate picture of the effort that you're really putting out, and you can set your head unit to have some kind of power smoothing. So it'll be reading your average power for the previous 3 seconds or 5 seconds or 10 seconds, depending on what you choose. And that'll basically mean that the numbers won't be jumping around half so much.
Your next step then should be to do some kind of testing. Now this is a really important test because what it's going to do is establish your baseline fitness levels, and that way you can quantify moving forward if you're making gains in fitness and that the training that you're doing is working.
Yeah, now what type of testing that you do can depend on what type of rider that you are. So for example, if you're an ultra endurance specialist or a time trialist, then testing your sprint power isn't really going to tell you very much. Neither is trying to improve it. And then conversely, if you're a track sprinter, you're never really going to want to work on your functional threshold power.
Yeah, now on GCN we have got a video which sets out how to test 4 key areas. So your sprint, your 1 minute power, your 5 minute power and your 20 minute power. And you can find a link to it in the description below this one.
Now having said that, all cyclists with power meters should do a 20-minute fitness test at least once, because that will help you find your functional threshold power, which is the theoretical maximum power that you can sustain for 1 hour. As you see from that, you can then get your training zones, and these are essential to help you write and then implement a training plan.
Yeah, now different coaches and riders will work by a different number of training zones, but we've always tended to use the 7-zone system by Dr. Andy Coggan. And you can find info about that over on the Training Peaks website. But regardless of what type of zones you end up doing and calculating, once you have, it's a good idea to write them down and put them on your stem. That way, whilst you're out training, you'll be able to take a quick glance down and make sure that you're always in the desired zone.
Yeah, and you also need to keep checking your functional threshold power regularly, because as you improve, then your training zones are also going to shift.
Our final recommendation is to make sure that you keep and log all the data that you gather from each and every ride. Otherwise, if you don't do that and you suddenly hit a peak of form, you could be left scratching your head as to why. Conversely though, if you have kept all of that data and you reach a peak of form, you can trawl back through it for the previous weeks and months to see if you can see any kind of trends or indications as to exactly why that might be. Conversely, unfortunately, sometimes you might also be looking back to see why you're not going very well.
Once you're familiar with your training data, then being able to go back through your training history can be absolutely invaluable. It also gives you the bigger picture as well, because you might not feel like you're making improvements week to week, but go back 6 months and the chances are that is going to show you some major trends, which is great for morale.
Yeah, it most certainly is. Now, if you would like to see the video we talked about a little bit earlier on, where we said we can show you how to test the various different levels, you can find that by clicking just up there. And if you'd like to know how to work out your functional threshold power, there's a video for that too, just down there.
Finally, before you go to either of those, do make sure you subscribe to GCN. You can do that, quick shortcut, click on the globe.